Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Football Talk from the Yorkshire Post, where we'll be discussing some of the latest talking points from the world of football with members of our football writing team. On this week's episode, we're joined by Chief Football Writer for the Yorkshire Post, Stuart Rayner, and Football Writer for the Yorkshire Post, Wobschall, to discuss all of the latest developments affecting our local clubs. Don't forget you can keep up to date with all the football news across Yorkshire and beyond by logging onto our website at yp.sport@nationalworld.com, as well as checking out our various Twitter feeds, the main one being at YP Sport. If you search for Yorkshire Post Sport, Yorkshire Post Football, or even Sheffield Sport on Facebook, you can find us there as well. And if you have any questions for our writers, you can get in touch using those various Twitter or Facebook pages, or email us directly with the subject matter as Football Talk Podcast at yp.sport@nationalworld.com.
YorkshirePost.co.uk.
As mentioned earlier in the intro, this week we're joined by Chief Football Writer for the Yorkshire Post, Stuart Rayner, and Football Writer for the Yorkshire Post, Wobschall. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Morning. Now, this week there's only one place to start, and that's at Bramall Lane. And congratulations go to Paul Heckingbottom and everyone at Sheffield United for achieving promotion back to the Premier League after 2 years in the second tier. They've done it with 3 games to spare, and promotion is richly deserved. With promotion and an FA Cup semi-final under their belts, this must be one of their best seasons for a while, Stuart. How do you rate the Blade season?
Yeah, well, I think, for people looking at it from outside, not fully understanding the context, I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate just what a job Sheffield United have done this season. I mean, we discussed this a couple of weeks back when we were discussing Paul Heckingbottom not being shortlisted for the Manager of the Year. I think probably a lot of Sheffield United fans understand, but it is worth repeating for anyone who doesn't, just the off-field difficulties that they've been up against, really. I mean, they sort of cite the problems COVID brought and the behind closed doors in terms of the relegation. But even if you sort of take it from once they went down, because obviously other clubs had similar problems to contend with, the fact that they've had this uncertainty over the ownership for the last couple of years, really. They had a takeover fall through last summer. They've got the takeover at the moment that is now, we believe the exclusivity period has lapsed, so it looks like that might have fallen through. In between time and connected with that, they've had a transfer embargo. They've had awful lot of injury problems. If you look at their transfer budget year on year, they've been running a deficit in terms of player trading. Only one paid for signing, I think, in the last 2 years. So although they've had things like the parachute payments, and managers have always been quick to say, they've had a squad with lots of players who've played in the Premier League. That squad's got older, it's got weaker, and it's been tough. But the most impressive thing about the way they've gone about it is they haven't complained about it. They haven't used it as an excuse. They've just got their heads down and got on with the job and made the most of what they have. And, pretty much all season they've been in the top 2. It's been a real, model of consistency in that respect. At the same time, as you touched on there, Mark, they've had a good run in the FA Cup, going to the semi-finals. It's been a real squad effort. It's been a real effort, full stop. They've played some good football at times, but they've got stuck in at other times when they needed to. I think they're fully deserving of their promotion. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just echo everything Stuart said there. I mean, it just reflects so well on what they've got in the dressing room there. They've obviously got, goes without saying, they've got talented players. The likes of Nadai and Ahmed Odzic, and they've had fine seasons in the Championship. Obviously named in the PFA Team of the Year, and rightly so. It just reflects on what they've got in the dressing room, but also the management as well. Look at Paul Heckingbottom's journey. 3 years ago, he was out of work, and I suppose his reputation had taken a few knocks, hadn't it? He'd left. He'd obviously scarred a little bit. He'd left Hibs and left Leeds, and did get a bit of stick from Leeds fans, but the manner of when he left Barnsley as well, he had a lot to contend with there. I thought he got some undue criticism there. It just reflects massively well upon him, first of all, how he's sort of picked himself up and really got his sort of career going in a managerial sense. His obviously playoffs last year, and he'd previously been promoted at Barnsley, so that's the great story. But yeah, as Stuart's right to say. I mean, what a fantastic group they have in the dressing room. They've had everything that's been thrown at them, and how they've sort of shown a strong jaw and cracked on. Really, I mean, they've not. It's fair to say. I said a few weeks ago in a piece for the paper, not the most spectacular side to win promotion ever, but it's about substance, isn't it? And you look back not too long ago, they had a bit of a dip. Sheffield United, I think they lost to Luton, didn't they? Everyone was starting to sort of question them. Middlesbrough were running hot on a big upward surge. Their fans were sort of chanting Sheffield United, "We're coming for you." So there was a lot of pressure on the shoulders of those players. And they've handled the pressure, masterfully. The sort of form since it's been tremendous. Won 6 out of 7, and it was ultimately Middlesbrough's form who had that little bit of a dip around Easter time, winning 1 in 5. Sheffield United held the nerve. They've been very consistent defensively. I think you look at their clean sheets. Everyone goes on about how many goals Middlesbrough score, but it's just much more balanced at Sheffield United. They've not been free-flowing all the time, but they've found different ways of winning. They've been, they've shown excellence in some games, but they've also dug out a few results. And that's what it's all about, and magnificent achievement. And, I don't know what Stuart thinks. I think there's obviously the Knights of the Dial have stepped up to the plate, but those core leaders in the dressing room have really shown up at an important time of the season. The ones who were promoted a few years ago, the Norwoods, the Egans of this world, they've held everything together, and obviously led superbly as well by Heckingbottom.
Yeah, I think they've been the key, and I would include ones like Basham, for example, who haven't played very much but have still been around the group. I mean, people quite rightly make a lot about parachute payments. They do horribly distort the Championship, and about the quality in Sheffield United's squad. But, you only need to look at the Championship League table, and as we speak, West Brom, Norwich and Watford are all outside of the playoff places. It's not just about having the money. It's not just about having the skill. It's about having those leaders to knit things together because, as Leon said, there were difficult times. There was that wobble, and some teams would have turned into a collapse. But Sheffield United, with those leaders, with Heckingbottom and those core of senior players, kept their head when it was difficult and saw through it. And it's been a really refreshing Championship season in a lot of ways. Let's say the fact that, again, as we speak, we've got 4 teams in the playoff places who don't have parachute payments with them. Clubs like Luton and Coventry are there basically just because they're well-run clubs with really good managers. Now, to be frank, you couldn't even call Sheffield United a well-run club. They're just a well-run team, as it were. The manager has done a brilliant job of running the first team in spite of, all the difficulties above him. And as I say, I do feel a lot of that comes from what Leon's just pointed out, that dressing room strength and that refusal to get sidetracked by the melodramas going around the club, and again, not to be panicking when things take a dip, when a key player gets injured, or when you lose to Middlesbrough and Millwall back to back and things like that. They've been a real model in that sense. They will have to step up again next season, just as Burnley and whoever wins the playoffs will. But for now, it's just about celebrating what is a really good achievement, and I think this squad will be fondly remembered by Blades fans in 10, 15, 20 years because of that combination of guts, determination, but also a lot of skill too.
Yeah. Everything about the club, just shown everything that's been good historically about Sheffield United, haven't they? You know, in terms of that sort of resolve and spirit, but also the sort of attitude as well. I mean, it's quite interesting. You see comments a few weeks ago from Chris Wilder about Watford, obviously former Sheffield United player, but he spoke of how obviously individually wise, in terms of talent, Watford are right up there, aren't they, at Championship level? But it's not about that. It's about gelling as a team, doing the right thing, making the right decisions, and coming through together. And that's what Sheffield United have certainly done. Burnley as well, and Watford have been the total opposite. And it just reflects so well upon all the playing and coaching staff there, and it's a thoroughly deserved triumph for the way they've sort of taken strength from adversity in various ways this season. And hats off to them. People can talk about style, this, that, and the other, but when it comes down to it, you look at all the ingredients that the promotion side needs. Sheffield United have showed them, and they deserve to get over the line.
Yeah. You look at Watford. You don't get up. You don't get promoted just on having skill, and then the same side of it, you don't get promoted just on having the mentality. No. Sheffield United have got all of it. They've got some really good players. They play some really good football, but when the going gets tough, they can do the other side of it too. They're a real model for other clubs to follow in terms of how to go about the job of winning promotion, I think.
Yeah. And next we turn our attention to the Premier League. And after a narrow 2-1 defeat at the hands of Fulham, Leeds United welcomed fellow relegation strugglers Leicester City to Ellen Road, and in spite of the support of a tremendous home crowd, could only manage a 1-1 draw. This leaves Javi Gracia's side perilously close to the bottom three, with only 5 games left. With 3 of those games being against Manchester City, Newcastle and Spurs, it is a tough run-in. And so now the question is simple. Can they escape the drop, Stuart?
And the simple answer is, I don't know. It's really, really hard to predict. I mean, it looks to me, I certainly was saying this before Nottingham Forest's winning midweek, but it was looking to me as though Southampton, Everton, Forest and Leeds all looked like they would go down, but obviously only 3 of them could. And I think it's just going to be really, really tight to get that last place. To say the fact that Forest have finally got themselves a win and picked up a bit of momentum, that will be worrying. Leeds need to respond in kind. I think this time last week, certainly I was looking at it thinking Leicester and Bournemouth, they need 4 points from that week. Well, they've only got 1 of them, so that puts an awful lot of pressure on that game against Bournemouth on Sunday. They really need to start pulling something out of the fire, because in all honesty, I mean, who can see them? It's crazy things happen this time of year, but who can see them getting anything against Manchester City? The way Manchester City are playing at the moment, who can see them getting anything from Newcastle United? West Ham, they play on the back of the Europa Conference League semi-final. Who knows? Spurs, the way they are at the moment, who knows? But it's what position they'll be in when they get to those last 2 games. They just need to get themselves moving again and get momentum, because, say, other teams look as though they're stuck in the mud at the moment as well. But, if Everton, we're speaking before Everton play Newcastle, if Everton were to do a Forest and just to pull a result out that you weren't expecting to, or Leicester or what have you, they could be in real trouble. And it just felt like a bit of a wasted opportunity against Leicester, because they took the lead slightly against the run of play, but they just seemed too timid to snatch what was there for them. They set back and they almost dared Leicester to score against them. Whereas Leeds had substitutes they didn't really seem to trust for whatever reason. Leicester had Jamie Vardy on the bench. He came on and he made the difference. He looked really sharp, and the fact that he looked so sharp is why I didn't include Leicester in that group of teams who I said look like they're going to go down, even though, again, as we speak, they're in the relegation zone. So yeah, it's worrying for Leeds. It was a really passive, timid performance, which is it's bad enough away from home, but as you say, with that passionate support at Ellen Road, it's really worrying to see them play that way in front of that atmosphere, and some of the decisions or non-decisions that were made by Javi Gracia really confused the supporters. They confused me every bit as much. They just seem to be a bit lacking in direction and badly lacking in confidence at the moment, and they need to quickly address that.
Yeah,
I think they're certainly going to have to do it the hard way, Stuart, aren't they?
Yeah.
I sort of look at them a little bit. It feels a bit like they're sort of caught between two stools a little bit. They've obviously took some good hidings, recently against Palace and Liverpool, and it's sort of getting back to that, trying to get back to some sort of defensive order, if you like. But it's also, you've got to be sort of attacking as well. But Gracia is thinking, well, I don't want to be too attacking. I don't be too attacking because we'll get caught at the other end. So it's difficult to see what the sort of game plan really is at the minute with Leeds. And yeah, the substitutions thing. I mean, there's real fine margins down there, and it could be a couple of really, really timely and astute substitutions could be the difference, couldn't it? In this sort of survival race in a couple of the games. So it's just all on Leeds' shoulders. I sort of made a prediction with a couple of journalists before these three games that Leeds have had. I thought to myself, I could see Leeds losing against Fulham, maybe losing and drawing against Leicester. This was before the Fulham game, but I thought to myself, I could see them going to Bournemouth and sort of winning. I think the last two games, the pressure's really all been on Leeds. They're sort of obviously 1 point out of 6 now. A lot of supporters are sort of writing them off, and I just think I just sort of see Leeds sort of going to Bournemouth with maybe a little bit of people writing them off and going there and just producing a win. That's what I'm hoping anyway. But they're going to have to get one in the next few games, aren't they? I mean, it looks. You look at the games down there. There's another huge game next week. Leicester play Everton. I've looked at the fixtures. Everton's last game worries me. They've got Bournemouth at home. I could see full Goodison Park. Everton perhaps getting out of it that way. But obviously Leeds have got to look after their own affairs. And you just look at it and they need a result against Bournemouth. So much. You just hope they can just dig out of 3 points, however it arrives. They obviously got that away win against Wolves relatively recently, and another one like that. Desperately need it.
Yeah, I mean it's so tight down there that just one result can really just change the mood. I mean, for example, 5 minutes before the end of Southampton's game against Arsenal, when Southampton were winning, you think, crikey, Southampton might be about to make a go of this. They might be about to beat Arsenal. And then all of a sudden, Arsenal equalise and they only get a draw against Arsenal, which, any other time in the season would be a great result. And you think, well, that's probably Southampton down. It's that extreme that over the course of a couple of minutes, things can change. Alluding to there, Forest's result on Tuesday kind of changes the way you look at them. I'm kind of looking at Leicester thinking there's a lot of quality there in the team and in the management. I think they'll get out of it, but they're still in the relegation zone. They still haven't done it. So yeah, I think it's going to be really, really up and down in terms of Leeds fans and the fans of all the other clubs thinking one day we can do this and the next day we're absolutely doomed. And it was sort of the latter category that game against Leicester. It was just a really, really demoralising night, I think, for everyone who supported Leeds United. And as I say, the team played in a way that looked like it lacked confidence. But I think a byproduct of not bringing on Willy Gnonto and Jorginho Ruta and people like that is what it does for their confidence. Because whatever the manager says in press conferences, whatever the manager says to them on the training ground, the fact that he wasn't prepared to bring them on in a match like that, in a situation like that, that tells them what he thinks about them. And that cannot be good for their confidence. So it kind of narrows down the number of players, you can actually rely on, you can actually turn to if if you damage their self-belief that much.
I think the one player you've obviously seen a bit more than I have, Stuart, the one player that we're really missing at the minute is Adams, isn't it? Definitely. Someone in the middle of the park. We've spoken long and hard about Leeds' deficiencies at the back in terms of the goals they've been conceding. Also probably to a certain degree about not being clinical enough up front. But at this time of the season, in the position that Leeds are in, someone of Adams' aggression, tenacity, and a bit of leadership in there, and McKennie seemed to play better when he's around. He's such a massive miss for Leeds in the situation they're in, and if he did manage to get back between now and the end of the season, and the worst happened for Leeds, that I think that would be a significant factor in it, because I just think he's so important in the position that Leeds are in, to have someone as reliable as him in there.
I think you're dead right, but you can't afford to be that reliant. So many, Everton have got the same issue with Calvert-Lewin missing, haven't they? Forest have got a few key players missing. We've said this before, both of us. Other players just have to step up and say, "Well, Tyler Adams isn't here. I'm going to," in Weston McKennie. In Weston McKennie's case, not to pick on him, but just as an example, he's got to say, "Well, look, I'm going to show why I'm a Juventus player and an American international," and other players too have got to, just got to show their qualities, show the sort of leadership we were talking about with Sheffield United. It's the same again. Don't feel sorry for yourselves. Get on with the job and do it. And that's the mentality they have to get out of this.
And now we turn our attention to League One. And firstly, we start with Sheffield Wednesday, whose battle for automatic promotion continues with consecutive 2-1 victories against Bristol Rovers and Exeter. With Plymouth and Ipswich continuing their fine form as well, the Owls now sit third in the table, 4 points behind Ipswich and only 2 games left. Will Darren Moore's team have to settle for the playoffs, Leon?
Yeah, it's looking that way, Mark, unfortunately. We've got the World Snooker Championship on at the minute, and if you sort of compare it to a snooker match there, I think they're trapped at the back end and need a couple of snookers, don't they, really? I mean, they've obviously got back on track of sorts with 3 wins in the last 4 games, but, the sort of big result in there was losing at Burton, and obviously before that, I think there were 7 or 8 games without a win, and I think if Wednesday seems likely miss out on the top 2, I think there'll be 2 words that many of the fans will be uttering first of all. It's Forest Green, really, isn't it? That result they got there, what a disastrous result that was in the sort of promotion race. It was always, obviously with respect to Barnsley, they've been sort of, as well as they've done, they've been on the sort of fringes of the sort of top 2 race. It's always been going to be 2 from 3, and 1 will miss out. Looks like it'll be Sheffield Wednesday. I mean, I did the game against Exeter on Saturday, and I thought they were quite. It didn't ultimately matter, but they were a little bit fortunate to get through in that game. They didn't play particularly well, and but they managed to find a way. They certainly have missed Josh Windass and George Byers, but as Stuart sort of alluded to earlier, that's every team, at this stage of the season, you've got to cope with that sort of thing. You've got to cope with losing players with injury. Others have to step up. You do get suspensions, and they just lost that momentum that they had. A couple of injuries, and they've just not been able to really rediscover it. And the problem has been that, at the same time, Ipswich have been unbelievable form, haven't they? And they've, I watched them on Tuesday night at Barnsley, and they really did look the real deal. They're unbeaten in 17, and obviously they play Exeter on Saturday, and Wednesday will be hoping that Exeter played as well as they did at Hillsborough. Hopefully have a couple of players back, but it'd be very surprising if Ipswich slipped up there. And Plymouth as well. They've held the nerve after the losing at Wembley heavily, and you've got to admire them for that. I sort of look at the sides there, and you sort of I sort of go back to January a little bit. You look at what Plymouth have done and Ipswich. Plymouth brought in the likes of Callum Wright. He's come in, scored some important goals. Ipswich brought a few players in. George Hurst came on loan. He was brilliant at Barnsley on Tuesday. Got a goal. Broadhead's come in as well, and they've had players to come in and make signings to come in January and make key contributions. Wednesday just sort of, I know they brought Aidan Flint in, but they could have done with bringing another forward in, and I know Darren Moore would have ideally liked to with Martin going back to Forest, but couldn't get one over the line. And they've stuttered and paying the price a little bit, and obviously Windass being out as well with injury, that's been really costly. But they've just got to not feel sorry for themselves, and looking highly likely to be the playoffs, and they've just got to muster up the mentality and the resolve and character to go again. They've got some senior players in there who've been around the block, who've handled various situations, and they're gonna have to step up.
Yeah. I mean that really is the nub of it for Sheffield Wednesday. I mean, footballers, by their very nature, they always have to be optimistic. They never have to give in until it's possible. You often hear about this time of the season, we're not giving in until it's mathematically done, or we're not celebrating until it's mathematically done. But I think Wednesday's players in this situation have to get their heads around, look, it's the playoffs, and if there's some dramatic collapse that we're not expecting from Plymouth or Ipswich, happy days, but we've got to get our minds in place for the playoffs. Because my worry every year, and I was sort of thinking this way in January, February, as Leon said, it was always a three horse race for two places, and the worry was always going to be that the team that finished third would miss out in the playoffs, because it's for the team that finishes in that position in any division, it's almost like a bit of a booby prize. You've been working all the time for automatic promotion, and then suddenly it's like you're playing for this instead, and as a result, you don't see that team win the playoffs as often as they should do. I mean, the fact of the matter is, Sheffield Wednesday will be the best team in those playoffs, because the team that finishes third, that's what they are. That's why we have league tables. But they have to rouse themselves. They have to lift themselves again. Looking at it at the moment, you'd be more optimistic about teams like Barnsley with the momentum, the confidence they've taken in, and about whether it be more likely Derby or Peterborough or whoever squeaks in.
Someone's finishing in there on the last day, isn't it? There's potential.
Exactly. We see it so often, don't we? So they need to start getting their heads in playoff mode now, not waiting till the playoffs actually start. Because as Leon says, they have actually sort of settled the ship a little bit the last couple of games. It's just that the two above have been so good. So all is not lost, but it is going to feel like such a consolation prize for Sheffield Wednesday. Yet, if they win the playoffs and they go up, everyone will be delighted. Everyone should be delighted. But yeah, they really need to just go into it in the right mindset, not thinking about who's not there, thinking about who is there, because you look around that dressing room and it's full of good players. As Leon says, there's lots of players who can step up and make light of these absences and get the job done. But I just worry for them, as I worry for any team that finds itself in that situation. But it can be done. We do see teams come through the playoffs doing that. It's just all about the mentality.
They just got to psychologically turn the page, haven't they, Stuart? They've got some strong lads in there, sort of, who've handled different situations. They've got to channel the hurt of last season as well. It's probably going to be the playoffs. Try and flip it round from what happened against Sunderland when it was a tight playoff. Couch over two legs just fell on the wrong side, and it's about the players involved there just remembering the pain that they had that day. saying, look, we're not going to feel like this again, and rallying everyone, and obviously Darren Moore as well. They've got it within them, but they've just got to put it all together, haven't they? And if you'd hope if it's the playoffs, if Windass came back in, maybe Byers, but who's to say about that? If at least Windass, who's been back training this week, looks like he could be. He's close to being involved again. Kerry as well obviously came on and made his comeback against Exeter. They're two sort of important senior players. That could be a little bit of a boost going into the playoffs, but they've just got no choice. They've just got to, it's effectively going to be a new chapter now. They've somehow got to forget about, 90 odd points. They could get 96 points, couldn't they? And finish third. But they've just got to park that. Else, if they don't move on from that, emotionally and sort of psychologically, then they probably will, they will lose in the playoffs. But they've somehow just got to start again. But it's certainly within them. But it's all about Sheffield Wednesday and what's in that dressing room.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could even use the 96 points. I mean, you talk about using Sunderland, and that's got to be a fuel. But they also should be looking at themselves, saying, look, it's really difficult to get 96 points in a football season. Don't waste it. They're not out of it. They're not out of promotion contention. They're just out of automatic promotion contention, and it would be such a shame to put in all the effort, all the sacrifices, physical and mental, that it takes to get 96 points over a season and not have something to show for it at the end of the season. So they've really got to use those things to drive them on, because if their mindsets are right, they are the best team in the playoffs and they will win the playoffs. But it is a big if their mindsets are right, because the playoffs don't come down to who is the best team. Just like I was saying about the championship promotion, it's about far more than that. And that's the side you worry about with Sheffield Wednesday. But if they get it right, it will get them over the line, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think it means so much, Stuart, if they were the ones who were the sort of last team standing at the end of the playoffs. I think historically as well, you go further back, the semi-finals they had with Huddersfield a few years back when they lost on penalties. They lost in the it was the final, wasn't it, against Hull, one game from the Premiership. If they did actually go up this way, it would exercise so many ghosts, wouldn't it, for the sort of supporters, for the likes of Barry Bannon. It would mean so much and be cathartic. But there's obviously a lot of football before then.
Yeah, well, I mean, they always say it's the best way to go up, but it won't feel like that to Sheffield Wednesday fans right now. Quite right.
Yeah, we shall see.
Yeah. And next we turn our attention to Barnsley, who have booked their playoff place following a 2-0 win over Oxford United. And in spite of a home defeat to Ipswich Town, is it all about maintaining momentum for the Tykes, Stuart?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult balancing act for teams like Barnsley and Middlesbrough in the division above, when you've qualified for the playoffs early. How much do you try and rest players? How much do you try and give players another opportunity? And how much do you just try and keep the foot down and keep that momentum up? Because, I mean, really, if the playoffs had started last weekend, you would have Barnsley as red hot favourites. The form, the momentum, the confidence they were carrying in. So if we can still say that, come May the 7th, May the 8th, then yeah, I'd quite like to be in their shoes if they can have a good last couple of games, because they're scoring goals, they're good defensively, they're confident, they're playing really well at home particularly, but they're playing well away too. They know what they're doing. They're just in a really good shape. And I think whilst people outside of the division will probably sort of not appreciate the threat Barnsley poses, I think whoever draws Barnsley in the playoffs, may well be Bolton. They'll be nervous about that game, because they'll be well aware what Barnsley are capable of.
And I think first of all, it's important to acknowledge they've had a good. I mean, they're obviously wanting more Barnsley, but acknowledge they've had a good season. Whatever happens this season, you cast your minds back to the summer. It just looked a season of consolidation and transition, didn't it? And I think the more pragmatic Barnsley fans would have perhaps taken, a top 10 finish, build again and build something for the year after. But they've massively surpassed that. The fact that they have a chance of automatic promotion, until the end of the 44th game of the season. I mean, that's remarkable in itself, and obviously it's testament to the fine job that Michael Duff's done. I was at the game on Tuesday against Ipswich, and fair play to Ipswich at the end of the day. They deserved to win that game and look the real deal. Things went against Barnsley in certain respects, but there was no denying that Ipswich deserved the victory. It was still a game of fine details, even though it was 3-0. Some sloppy concessions for Barnsley, but it was a game that was obviously massive for both sides, and obviously Sheffield Wednesday supporters will have been following it as well. You had that sort of playoff intensity feel about it. There were 5,000 Ipswich fans in the away, which a remarkable turnout for a midweek fixture, a long way from home. And even though Barnsley sort of came out on the wrong side, there was some sort of useful lessons as well. You've got to be full, it's got to be full concentration and focus. Amid an arena where there's a hell of a lot on it. So hopefully Barnsley can learn those the lessons they've had. Remarkable season for them, and they'll be hoping there's a few more chapters yet. I think they'll be quite, certainly with the game at the weekend, they'll be pragmatic in terms of the selection. And Michael Duff, his pre-match press conference, spoke about being fair to the teams down there. They play MK Dons, who are in a big relegation fight, and there's a few in it down there, Oxford, Accrington, one or two more. Barnsley aren't just going to go there and en masse play a totally weakened side. And you actually look at the sort of fixtures as well. They've used a lot of substitutes, and Duff's been big on. He's made quite a few triple substitutions, and he's trusted his squad. So, I think a few more of those might get some starts and game time, but it'll certainly be a competitive side that he puts on down there. But they just maybe experiment a little bit this weekend, and obviously the last game's against Peterborough at home, and they'll be wanting a good performance there to take that momentum into the playoffs. But they've perspective is that Barnsley have had a great season, and they've just got to give it a good shot now, and I think they've got a good chance.
Yeah, and Leon made a very good point last week about Middlesbrough, who are again in a similar position, and their fixtures that they're running is actually running to keep them sharp. And the fact that Barnsley finish against Peterborough, who were probably going to be playing for the last playoff spot that day, that's probably a good thing as well in terms of finishing with a really competitive game. They can use that to their advantage. That's a real positive for them. And as Leon says, the most important thing to say is it's been a great season. It really has. It's certainly exceeded my expectations. And they can almost go in and enjoy these playoffs where, if it's Bolton, Derby, and Sheffield Wednesday, for example, even Peterborough, they won't be able to enjoy it because they will be under real pressure to get into the Championship. Barnsley obviously want to be there. I'm not trying to be patronising or anything, but it's a bit more of a free hit for them. They can play with a bit of enjoyment, hopefully show the best of themselves, and if they do, get up that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And next, our attention turns to League Two. And firstly, Bradford City's push for automatic promotion took a serious knock when they conceded a 97th minute equaliser at home to Gillingham. With two of the Bantams' final three games of the season being against the champions Leyton Orient and Northampton Town. What do you make of Mark Hughes' playoff chances, Leon?
Yeah, it was just so frustrating on Saturday, wasn't it? I was at Sheffield Wednesday, but myself and Stuart, you keep abreast of developments at Yorkshire clubs elsewhere, and obviously Bradford were winning and almost there, and then a desperately painful goal. I think it was in the 7th or 8th minute of stoppage time, and I sort of look at Bradford over the course of not just this season but previous seasons. They seem to be a side susceptible to doing that, and they've had a few rough ones this season. I think there was one game, wasn't it, a controversial penalty? I think it was against Swindon as well, where they dropped points at home. So yeah, it's just those draws, isn't it? As well as they've done sort of since Christmas, and that consistency. I mean, they've only lost 2 or 3 games. That'll be on reflection. They'll look at that. 2 or 3 more of those draws into wins, and they would have been almost there, wouldn't they? But huge. It looks pretty. Yeah, they're going to have to pushing it to get into the top 3 now, and they've got a huge game at Northampton, who are they're looking like they're going to finish in those business positions, and Bradford have got Orient as well on the last day, and obviously Orient are promoting themselves, but they went to Mansfield in midweek, and they're pushing for the playoffs and got an impressive 2-1 win in the circumstances. So it doesn't look like they're on the beach quite yet, and all partied out. So yeah, it might actually suit Brad for the next 2 games. They've got 3 games left, 2 away. The away form's been pretty strong, hasn't it, this season? They don't seem to give too much away. Northampton, then they've got a big game midweek at Crewe, and yeah, they've just got to hold the nerve, haven't they? And obviously channel the disappointment of last week and get over the line. And because obviously Mansfield are chasing hard, aren't they? They're just outside the top 7. They're pushing all the way, and I look at Mansfield's games. The last 2 games, I think they've got Colchester and Harrogate, and obviously Harrogate have just clinched the safety. So on paper, with respect, they're decent games for Mansfield to have. So it's just about Bradford showing a strong jaw, holding the nerve, and getting the job done. And if it's not going to be the top 3 automatic, which it doesn't look particularly like at the minute, just nail down the spot for the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a real killer of a week. Not just that game, but losing to Swindon before. I've been at Rochdale when they won there the previous weekend. It really felt to me, when you just dip into an isolated game, it really felt like there was momentum building, and they were really starting to look dangerous, and the situation was still in their own hands. So to see them pick up 1 point out of 6 in the next week, just so demoralising. But it seems to be the story of their season. They've always been playing catch up. It's always been just out of reach. And if we do this, and if this happens, we can get automatic promotion. But there's always been those ifs, and there still are, to be honest. If they win at Northampton and then they win at Crewe, they'll be 2 points behind Northampton going into the last week with, by definition, a better goal difference by then. But now that they've got Stockport, Carlisle and Salford to sort of elbow their way past, it is more likely the playoffs. But it just feels like anything could happen. I mean, they could literally get automatic promotion or miss the playoffs altogether. When we've only got a week left of the season, it's quite ridiculous, really. But it's a real tough one. That they're two. As you say, 2 of those 3 games really leap out at you as really difficult games. But cometh the hour. These are the games the team's got to respond to. I really don't know what to expect. I'm going to be at Northampton on Saturday. I have no idea what's coming. It could be a story of absolute disaster or complete joy. It's really hard to second guess. And when I was saying about how Sheffield Wednesday should play it mentally, I'm really not sure how Bradford should, in terms of whether they should be going down that optimistic route and pushing, sort of talking about automatic promotion, or whether they should be getting their minds around the playoffs. I think it's a really difficult one to play, but it's just a fascinating, fascinating league table in League Two at the moment, and I really wouldn't like to second guess it.
I think you're right to say, Stuart, there are sort of parallels really at least Sheffield Wednesday and Bradford. Obviously, Sheffield Wednesday is certainly at a a level that historically they shouldn't be anywhere near, and it's the same with Bradford in League Two. But that's not what it's all about. You've got to deal with the here and now, and supporters of both sides are probably deep down the thoughts themselves that we do get out of it. It's certainly not going to be the easy way. It's going to be by the hard route. The encouraging thing to me, if you're sort of looking at glasses half full, as I mentioned earlier, they have been really hard to beat, Bradford, haven't they? They've shown a consistency in that regard since Christmas. Even though they obviously have drawn too many games, but that ability not to get beaten, obviously, to get in the playoffs. That's going to be massive, isn't it? The sort of securing the knowledge there's a good team ethic and togetherness and a desire there, to get over the line. And I just hope that carries on if it's going to be the playoffs. But I don't think Mark Hughes is a pretty calm character. He's not one for sort of the panic, is he really? So I think they're in safe hands in that regard as well. He's been in a lot of big games at the end of seasons as a player and a manager, and just hope they can, a bit like Sheffield Wednesday, from their perspective, hold the nerve.
Yeah, I mean, it's home draws that have let them down, isn't it, Leo? Not defeats. So I suppose if you're going into a two-legged game and that's your weakness, well, you draw the home game and you win the away game, don't you?
Yeah.
The fact that they've got a striker you can bank on at League Two level in Andy Cook is another really big strength. But yeah, they've just got to win the next three games and see what happens, basically, haven't they? As I say, anything is possible. You always look at the fixtures and you always try and second guess. Oh well, this team will definitely beat them, or they might drop points there. But you just never know. There's so many ridiculous things happen at the end of the season. But the fact of the matter is, 43 games in the season, they're 7th in League Two. That's where they deserve to be at that stage. If they finish in the top three, it'll be because they deserve to. If they finish 8th, it'll be because they deserve to. They've just got to make things happen. They can't be waiting for things to happen. Now they've got to make things happen. And as I say, anything is possible. It'd be really exciting.
Yeah,
I mean, just sort of quickly pushing it forward quickly, ever so slightly. I think if Bradford do finish in the playoffs, I don't know what you think about this, Stuart, but I don't think it'd be a bad thing if they finished. Who's to say where they'd finish? But if they finished 6th or 7th and we're at home I agree. At home in the first leg, I don't think it'd be too bad a thing for Bradford not to be at home for the second leg. That's just a little feeling in my water, anyway.
Yeah, they're a team who are better away at home, aren't they, than at home? So the old adage about finishing at home doesn't quite apply. But one thing, when you've had 15 draws already this season, they'd best be practicing their penalties if they do end up in the playoffs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And next we turn our attention to Doncaster Rovers, who have had only Pride to play for recently. And after the disappointment of losing 3-1 to Newport County after leading at half-time, it's now 7 defeats in the last 9 games. Is it time for them to reset for next season, Stuart?
Yes, it's quite simple. I mean, you're quite right in what you say. They've only had Pride to play for. So if they've lost 7 out of the last 9, that does not reflect very well on them. Leon's done an interview with John Ryan this week, which I would urge all Doncaster fans and anyone who's interested in their plight to read. He's very concerned about them going down the route of a York City or a Scunthorpe, and frankly, you can see it happening the way the second half of this season has panned out. I think, I thought all along, we often compare Bradford and Sheffield Wednesday on this podcast. I thought all along these seasons could have gone similar ways for Barnsley and Doncaster, and I think the fact that Barnsley have made the playoffs, I think that, or rather the fact that Doncaster have struggled, I think that highlights how well Barnsley have done, and vice versa. It reflects badly on Doncaster. Yeah, they do. They in terms of everything, the board need to re-examine the support they're giving to the football side. They've talked about providing more money. They need to follow that up with actions. The coach, either Danny Schofield has got to have a serious rethink about how he does things, and not rip things up and start again, but just come back with a different, better, approach to his way of playing, or they've got to change the coach, which I think is, in all honesty, probably the easier and would probably be the more popular approach on the terraces. The players really have to look at themselves, because, as you say, playing for pride, if you lose 7 out of 9, what does that say about you as a professional? Yeah. There's some decent players in that squad. They aren't, some of there's some who are just not good enough, but there's some who are not performing to their capabilities, and they've got to look in the mirror, ask themselves if that's them, and resolve to do something about it, because there's no doubt, you look over the last 3 years, this is a club on the slide, and we've seen lots of clubs sliding and dropping away. Rochdale, bottom of the division. I remember watching them in League One a couple of years ago. They're one of those clubs. There are, say, York and Scunthorpe are the big examples. They've really got to have a serious think about how they're going to address this slide, because if they don't do anything, if they don't do enough, they're only heading one way.
Yeah.
It's just seriously worrying times, isn't it, Stuart? I mean,
it is, yeah.
The fact that it's been a grim last third of the season at Rovers, but it's happened 3 years on the trot now for different reasons. Obviously, they were relegated last season, and then the season before they completely fell out of contention for the. It's hard to think now. The League One playoffs. I think in February 2021 they were actually in the automatic promotion picture, but the last ends of the season. In the last 3 seasons have been completely pitiful, and it's a club that's totally, it appears to have lost its mojo. There's disagreements between the fans and the board and the manager, and there just doesn't seem to be a unity and a togetherness, and obviously dreadful form, 1 win in 14. Yes, they've got problems with it, with injuries and. Selection issues, this, that, and the other. But Danny Schofield spoke. He spoke about players showing that fight and desire, taking something into next season. But it just looks too much for quite a few of them, doesn't it? Really, and the end of the season, they can't come fast enough. Really, this is when the real issues need to be addressed. Is Schofield the man they're going to actually stick with? I mean, obviously, the noises recently from the hierarchy suggested that they're going to up the budget and stick with them. But it's one of those, isn't it? At the end of the season, you think, how many season tickets will be sold for next season? Are fans buying into Schofield? Is it a big? It'd be a big, perhaps a risk in that regard to stick with him. And they're probably conscious of the need to, if they bring in an experienced manager who's a bit more of a name, just to re-energise everything, and then they can start to make it a clean page in that regard. But we shall see. But obviously big fears that if they do happen to start the season badly, getting into a tailspin and obviously being candidates for relegation, that's the big fear. But they've had a few big summers recently at Doncaster, and this one promises to be the biggest of the lot.
Yeah, I mean, say John Ryan mentioned York and Scunthorpe, didn't you? But you can look at all 3 divisions of the National League. They are absolutely full of clubs who've made the same mistake and sleepwalked their way out of the Football League, and it is so hard to get back into the Football League. There is so much competition at that level. They just cannot afford to do it. But as Leon says, it first and foremost, it's about getting the fans back on board. It's so depressing when you're there or you watch the highlights on TV. The number of empty red seats you see, and I'm not having a go at anyone. It must be miserable as a Doncaster fan. Yeah. Turning up out of a sense of duty. They've got to give them something that they can enjoy watching and get behind. and that's got to be the starting point this summer. But they really need a complete rethink, because as I say, even if they only address sort of, you know, one of those issues or two of those issues we've been talking about, they'll still be on the downward curve. They need to sort the whole thing out. They really do, because it's just been an absolutely horrible season for them, on the back of a horrible season last year, on the back of a horrible season the year before. All the warning signs are there. They cannot afford to ignore them.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's been probably the worst season they've had, Stuart, since, the season they got relegated from the Football League in 97-98 was probably the worst season that any club has ever experienced in the Football League. Certainly not as bad as that, but obviously the bottom line is that Rovers are in the worst position they've been in for about 20 years, really. You know, the fear is they're going to be left to the total diehards who were there in the bad old days, who stuck with them. The fear is that it could pretty much be those that are left if things don't sort of turn around fast. There's a lot of fans jumped on board when the club had the glory years, land of milk and honey under John Ryan, and they were going up the divisions and getting to having cup runs and winning the Johnston Pates Trophy. They've obviously been with them for this ride, but I don't know how many of those will sort of stick with them during these times, and it'll just be left to the sort of diehards, really, who were there before. That's the worry, and they've just got to address things in the summer. The worst state of the club for 20 years. It's time for some big decisions and to sort of turn the ship around somehow.
Yeah, and absolutely no disrespect to the Dave Penny team in the 90s, which did a brilliant job to bounce back, as Leon says, during some really dark times for the football club. But the conference is so much harder now to get out of, because it's just becoming absolutely clogged up with, former Football League clubs with really big pedigree, and then clubs with new money into them, and in some cases, clubs that fall into both that category. It's a really, really difficult division to get out of. I just cannot emphasise enough how much they can't, all the talk will be about promotion, and they've got to think that way, but they really just cannot afford another relegation. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And finally for this week, we turn to Harrogate Town, who, after their recent good run of form came to an end at Northampton Town, travelled to South Wales and came away with a great 3-2 victory at Newport. With Town now mathematically safe from the drop, what will Simon Weaver need to do this summer to get the squad ready for next season and hopefully have a better season, Leon?
Well, I think he should have a good holiday first. I mean, the first point of call is that Harrogate are a Football League club next season.
Yep.
It's been a grim, difficult campaign, but the big picture is they've held the nerve and they've retained the tenure. I mean, they've a bit like talk about teams having too many draws. They're probably looking at Harrogate. They probably have over the course of the season, but they've also shown a bit of a consistency in the second half of the season in terms of not getting beaten. They've not won loads of games in the final third of the season, but they haven't lost a lot of them either. So that suggests a spirit and togetherness there. And I think the wider issues of looking beyond what's happened this season, they could probably wait a few weeks. And I think in the here and now, it's just important to recognise that it's job done for Harrogate. Not this season. They would have been particularly wanting back in at the end of July now. I nearly said August, but the season started in July, didn't it? So it's not panned out in the way that they wanted, but it's sometimes seasons become difficult ones, and it's how you deal with it. And ultimately, Harrogate have dealt with it. They've not been particularly consistent in terms of wins, but they've just about kept their heads above water, and they survived. And it was one of those seasons that it soon became apparent it was going to be a sort of fight against relegation sort of season, and just about finishing above that line, and that's what they've done.
Yeah, I think you've just got to be realistic about it. For a team, bear in mind Harrogate's average gate is less than half the League Two average. For them to still be in the Football League, for us to be talking that way, 2 games early, is as big an achievement as the achievement we started off talking about with Sheffield United.
Yep.
I think, obviously you've always, as a football club, the whole point of being a football club is that you're always thinking about how to get better and how to improve. And they do need to look at that, and they will want to sort of build on the tighter defensive structure that they've been able to develop in the second half of the season and improve that further still. But it's a really big achievement for them to avoid relegation. If they'd finished 22nd and they'd stayed up on goal difference, it would be a big achievement. So I think there's a lot of credit due to Simon Weaver and of course his players. A lot of credit to the hierarchy of the club. Obviously, it's a slightly odd situation there where the chairman is the manager's dad, but the fact that they have stuck with Simon Weaver through thick and thin during these last couple of Football League seasons, and they've been rewarded for it, is magnificent. I hope they can continue building on that. I think they need to continue building on the relationships they're building with Football League clubs higher up the scale in terms of getting in loan players. Jaheim Headley from Huddersfield in the first half of the season was a really big help for them, and they've had a lot of good loan players from Huddersfield, so they need to keep developing that and say build similar relationships with other clubs. But yeah, above all, just well done Harrogate Town. They really have been swimming against the tide in terms of the resources they've worked with, and they've done a magnificent job.
It's a pretty slim chance, but they've still got a chance of finishing above Doncaster. The 4 point is probably not going to happen, but the 4 points behind them, so they might not be statistically at the end of the season Yorkshire's worst performing EFL club. But I suppose that that's by the by, really, isn't it? I echo what Stuart said. I think it's surviving at this level is an achievement for Harrogate. You sort of look at them a few years ago as well. That obviously performed brilliantly in the first place to get out of the conference, and as much as coping with all the other things, Weaver's had to sort of try and build a new side, hasn't he? He's had the heroes who've got them to promotion. He's obviously quite a few of them have sort of moved on to other clubs, and alongside consolidated in League Two, which is difficult enough in itself. He's had to sort of build another side as well, and it's obviously all the other difficulties which come with moving up from a conference to the Football League. It's not as if Harrogate have got the advantages of Wrexham with it, with a huge budget to bring in players. That's not what it's about at Harrogate. Sort of a certain amount of learning on the job as well, isn't there? Bringing in, establishing relationships with league clubs and bringing in loan players and just coping with being a football league club, and in a difficult season for Harrogate, they've managed to achieve their aims, and well done to them in that regard.
YorkshirePost.co.uk.
Many thanks to Stuart, Rayner and Leon Wobschall, who will doubtless join us again soon for more discussions on the Yorkshire football scene. But don't forget, you can keep up to date with all the football news across Yorkshire and beyond by logging on to our website at yp.sport@nationalworld.com, or if you search for Yorkshire Post Sport, Yorkshire Post Football or even Sheffield Sport on Facebook, you can find us there as well. If you have any questions for our writers, you can get in touch using those various Twitter or Facebook pages, or email us directly with the subject matter as Football Talk Podcast at yp.sport@nationalworld.com. As ever, many thanks for listening, look after yourselves, and bye for now.